In this versus video and classes part 2, we are going to put head-to-head instance versus class methods. Let's get to it. Pardon the interruption, I do have a big announcement before we continue on with the video content. And I want to say that I do have a new Instagram account. It is HD Coding, and this is where I will now be posting in all of my latest updates, as well as maybe some memes and other content that is having to do with my channel. And you can see multiple posts that I have here, as well as upcoming new videos and content that will be posted. And this is where I will be posting in future content from now going forward, and I'll slowly transition to be using this sole account. So if you haven't already, go ahead and follow this handler right here, and I'll probably follow back, and you can be up to date of what I'm doing within the YouTube realm. The other announcement that I want to have announced is that I did create a website for everyone to take a look at the latest videos, and I put them from the most up-to-date on the very top for you to take a look at. And this will take you to the individual YouTube itself, and you can watch those cases when you need. And I am going to build out and update the site as we go, and this will have different sections. For now, we're just talking about coding concepts, but later on there'll probably be a tutorial section, a podcast section, things like that. So this site will grow as the channel grows, and all of the content will be posted also on this particular site. So that is all of the announcements I have for now, and let's go ahead and continue on with the video. Now, before we get started and talk about what instance and class methods are, we need to take a step back and take a look at what classes and what methods are first, and then we can see what the difference between the instance and class methods. With the class, as you remember, it is a blueprint of a particular object. With methods and functions, those terms are interchangeable. They are grouping together certain logic all in one particular place, and you are performing that to achieve a single task. So with that key idea in mind of what a class and a method is, and when we are talking about an instance, we are talking about a particular instance of a particular object. So it does make sense that when we are talking about instance method, it pertains to the logic that is having to perform at that particular instance. Class methods are run within the whole entire class as a whole. And with class methods, they are typically going to have some sort of a keyword attached to them, and we'll take a look at what those are. So one of the better ways to understand what an instance and a class method is with some examples. So with the instance method, and I'm using Ruby here, is that I am going to use the instance method, which is typically look like a regular method within a class. And an instance method pertain to a particular instance. So that means that the inputs and output will change depending on the particular type of car that we're dealing with. So here I have a car trip, which is what we've seen in the last video, and also to print color as well. And that input and output will change depending on the particular instance of that car. So my car, when I ran through this particular instance method, that would be a different output as if I ran it with my dad's car with this particular instance method. And that is one of the things that we may need to do within a class, is we need to change it depending on a particular instance, not the class itself. Or else if we wrote this as a class method, that would change all of the mileage of all of the cars. And we don't want that. We just want to change the mileage of the single car that we are referring to. Now, when you are using an instance method, there are a few things that you need to do. And when you do take a look at them, instance method do look like a particular regular method. You need to call it after you are having a particular instance of it. For example, if I do an instance of a new car here, so this is just a brand new car using the class. This is Bob's car. That is an instance of a car. So that means that for this particular instance, I'm able to call this method of .carTrip 23 here. And that will give you the exact number of what the calculation is when we add that car trip. And that's how instance method works, is that this will work and it will be different because we are working with Bob's car versus my car or your car. And in some cases, when you have some methods that are instance methods that don't need any parameters, you may or may not need to call the method within the parentheses like so. So that really does depend on your programming language. So if you're calling something without parameters, then you may need to pass in those parentheses or not. So now let's go into class methods. Class methods is logic that is having to do with the object as a whole. It's something that all objects or of that particular case will always have. Here, within this example, you can see that all cars honk and they go beep beep. And that is logic within itself within this particular class. So that's why in some programming language, it will do a keyword self. Just to classify that it is a class method, is that when we are doing this here, that is a huge indicator that we are doing a class method. And it might be self, it might be this, it really does depend on your programming language. And this is something that you would always use for all of your objects. So when you are using a class method, you would be tempted to use an instance of that class and call the method here. But if you look at it and try to do that, in most cases you would receive an error. For example, we have that same Bob's car here, but in this case we're calling the class method. But since this is a class method, this will give you an error. It doesn't work with instances. It works with the car itself. So if you want to call in this particular class method, you need to call in the car itself. So it'll be capital car.honk. In most cases, classes are uppercase, and that is how you would be calling and using that particular car. And those are the key differences with classes and instance methods. In most cases, you would be using instance methods because it will change depending on the instance, but in rare occasions, you may be using a particular case of a class method for changing everything with the car, something that all the car needs to do. A good example of this is that if you have a bank account, maybe at like 5 p.m., a good class method to do is going to do like a security check. That might be a live example of how you would be using a class method. And an example of an instance method here in a live project, a live example, is that within the bank account, each of your bank account will have different deposits. Because when we are depositing, we're not depositing to all the cars, we're depositing to your own account. So that is an example of an instance method within real life. And those are the key things about classes and instance methods. If you have any questions, post a comment down below. And there is a new website as well as a new Instagram, and I will also post that below inside of my description. And I will see you in the next video. See ya!